Good afternoon, everybody. This is your favorite aspiring revolutionary here, a wandering author, reminding you that we are all the authors of our own lives. As always, my message remains the same: spend less, live more, earn your freedom with frugality. And today, I finally made it to my other major goal for the summer, which was Acadia National Park in Maine. There's the Atlantic Ocean, I believe. We're going to discuss Sparta and its developments up until the classical era, but from the Archaic age to the classical era. But just look at the sea here. Now, I will tell you, it was more crowded than I generally like. I prefer being places without tons and tons of people, but now that it's starting to get a little later, it's about 6:30 my time, it's starting to clear out quite a bit. And so that's been cool. Don't want to lose my pen there. As always, my message remains the same: spend less, live more, earn your freedom with frugality. Now, studying Archaic Sparta poses two serious difficulties. One, they were by nature a xenophobic society. In Plutarch's book Lycurgus, he reports that Sparta would cast their deformed infants at birth away in order to keep their bloodline pure. However, we do have records of King Agesilaus II, who was lame, a Spartan king, putting a dent in that narrative. They also were known to expel foreigners from time to time, if they didn't like a group of people. And Sparta is pretty unique. They're kind of like a cultural science experiment, because the way that they have their full citizenship set up, early in Sparta's history, 800 BCE, they're the same as any other Greek city-state. But they win the first and second Messenian wars. We'll go over that here in a second. Afterwards, they are the rulers of a very large number of subjects. In fact, their subjects outnumber them. And to compensate, their civilization basically becomes a race of ultra warriors, of just like a supreme warrior class, in order to keep their subjects in line. And they ruled successfully for several hundred years, so that was a viable strategy for quite a while. Now, Spartan history is notoriously biased as well. So, because they were xenophobic, we don't have a ton of outside perspectives on them, and they were pretty biased about their own history. Their entire society's legal code was supposedly written by the hands of one man, Lycurgus, who they would later honor as a god. In Plutarch's notes on this ruler, the book, self-titled Lycurgus, he tells us he had a unique perspective, such as whenever he banned coinage. So there's a popular myth where Lycurgus bans coinage, and you can hear the foghorns of some of these boats that are out in the Atlantic. There's a popular myth in which the Greek lawmaker and statesman in Sparta, Lycurgus, banned coin money. Now, that didn't actually happen, but there was a group of, we might call them lobbyists, back in the day that that got coinage banned for a little while in the 4th century BCE. Commerce and money making occurred in Sparta, but full Spartans did not do it, right? So there are three general classes of people in Spartan society. The Helots at the bottom, who were like the serfs, slaves. Their situation's a little complicated. The precarious, which is like the shopkeepers. The Greek word translates to those who surround us, and they're kind of like the Roman equivalent of the Italian allies, the Etruscans, and like them. And Spartans were warriors. The ones that are close to us, the Kiai, did like the shopkeeping and stuff, and then the Helots did all the farming and stuff. And they served as sacrifices during Spartan warriors' rites of passage when they turned to adulthood. The original inspiration for Sparta's coinage banning escapades likely began in the 4th century BCE, when the state was suffering from wealth disparities and Lycurgus was worshipped as a god. By invoking his name, a group of senators successfully banned private money for a few decades in the 300s. Like I said, 400 years earlier, in the 700s, little separated Sparta from other Greek city-states, besides the fact that they crafted the most pottery per capita. So, if we look at the archaeological record before writing, they were just like Athens and Thebes and all the other major Greek city-states back then. However, once the Spartan warrior class emerges, their art production drops precipitously. It's surprising. Which begs the question, like, if you create a warrior class people, do you necessarily have to give up your art capabilities? Is it like an RPG video game where you have to, choose a specialty or a skill tree? So early Proto-Sparta's roots sank into the ground of Laconia, which is like the region of Greece that will eventually become Sparta, following their Messenian conquests. After the First Messenian War's conclusion, early Sparta won the exceptionally fertile Pemissus River region. And because they had an advantage with farming, it set the stage for them to create long-term and lasting advantages in other aspects of their culture's history, like in the game Civilization. Having an early advantage in one area can lead to long-term advantages in other areas. But Sparta is never able to quite dominate all of Greece forever, for whatever reason, and we'll see why. Now, 70 years later, into the year 610 BCE, Sparta completely annexes Messenia after concluding the aptly named Second Messenian War, becoming the single Greek polity. So, Messenia was like the major power surrounding them early on, like the Etruscans with the early Romans, and they annex them. Unfortunately, there is a hidden dark side to this victory, which was that all of a sudden, native-born citizens were outnumbered excessively by hateful and vengeful subjects. The people that they conquered did not like them, and they outnumbered them. What results likely took years to develop in reality, but through the history's lens, it appears to be merely an instant. Like I was saying earlier, looking back in the historical record, nothing separates Sparta from the rest of Greece, and then boom, warrior class. And if we look at the history, because history has a way of compressing time when we look back, it seems like it happens in an instant. To retain control of their hostile and recently conquered territory, Spartan citizens evolved into an elite warrior class of landowners who underwent a specific and rigorous training program, becoming supreme warriors to maintain dominance over said subjects. It's like it's a totally different way to run your society for sure. It lasted for a good while. Man, just look at, so this is Acadia National Park, by the way. Interestingly enough, the time of Sparta's ascendance to a warrior elite culture, we also see a corresponding decrease in artistic output in the historical record. I guess there isn't much time for leisure when you are dominating the populace, it seems. And now let's talk a little bit more about the subjects of Sparta. And again, this right here is all the way up in Maine. It's on the Atlantic coast, though. I got here a little later in the day, so I may try to stay here for one more day. But Sparta subjects were divvied up into two classes, the precarious and the Helots. Precarious, in Greek, translates as those who live around us. In the original Laconian Greek, now this group of people encompassed roughly 80 towns and villages that surrounded Sparta proper. They were required to serve in the army, but they were personally free. However, they had no say in policy making. Similar to a colonist, like we were subjects of the British Empire. We paid taxes. We could serve. We were impressed into their military, and we could say that we were kind of like them, and they would come to our defense. But at the end of the day, we weren't free. But also, the crown didn't own us. A lot of parallels there. Most economic activity did remain in the hands of the precarious class, as full-born Spartan citizens restricted themselves to a martial lifestyle, believing commerce was a source of vice. So we actually have a word in English called laconic that means like curt, or like Clint Eastwood style, and that's a reference to Dane Carlin, but it is also accurate. And what that is Spartans, their entire culture emphasized a very straightforward warrior ethos, right? The rest of Laconia, after their nearby neighbors who were put into the precarious class, were reduced to basically what amounts to serfdom. Helots. In the original Greek, this translates as captive or the conquered. Helot gangs would end up crewing Spartan farms and were obliged to hand over 50% of their farm's produce. At least that's what the records indicate. Helots were owned, but they were not slaves in the traditional sense. So again, Helot is a person. It's a term used for the subjects that Sparta conquered. In part, Helot's reluctance to revolt can be explained by a localized social structure. They could still earn a living wage, and they could, like, some Helots could be in a better situation than others, and but they still had to all give 50% of their stuff to Sparta. There were two major Helot uprisings that crept into the historical record, one in the 460s and one in 369, despite the mixed society lasting for centuries. So, again, Helots outnumbered Spartans by some accounts by as many as 2 or 3 to 1 or greater. But there were few uprisings or revolts, even though if the Helots were organized, they definitely could have done it. Now, they didn't have iPhones or Facebook, so I'll give them credit. And also, Sparta was an elite warrior race, right? Sparta became, now my takeaways for this week, or today, Sparta became dominant as a response to changing circumstances. So they won in Messenia before the First and Second Messenian War. They were just like any other city-state. After this, they were the rulers of a ton of subjects, and to maintain rule, they just chose the martial skill route and gave up their art. So you see a lot less art. But initially, Sparta's edge was in industrial and creative production. The biggest thing that we know about them from early history in the Archaic period was that they produced more pottery than anybody else, which suggests they had a more sophisticated industrial base. The way they stratify society leads to a ton of inherent tension. Having 3-tiered class of society can be tense. So says history, at least, in Sparta. But they kept it together for hundreds of years, so. Social structures are adaptive change and exist in numerous forms. That's my final takeaway. So, from Sparta's example, you can have basically a slave society that's run by a group of warrior elites that are, and have it last for several hundred years. I think most of us agree that that's probably not the best way to run society. But the point is in human history, there have been many different types of society. They exist. And looking forward, we're going to continue talking about Sparta, agogy, which is Spartan or Laconian for raising. And it talks about their educational system, and we're going to catch up historically to where we got to with Athens. And there's like 2 or 3 parts to this park system here, Acadia. So I've been driving a ton lately, and I'm kind of tired of being in the car. I want to spend more time outside, although I have hiked a ton. That's really all I've got for you guys today, though. This is a wandering author, reminding you that we are all the authors of our own lives. As always, my message remains the same: spend less, live more, earn your freedom with frugality. What are you doing in order to inspire, uplift, and empower your community today? Because this world isn't changing unless we all do our part, because this world isn't changing unless we all do our part. You can count on me to do mine daily. Until next time, I love y'all.